All-electric homes aren't just clean and healthy, they save energy and money too. Lucky you, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, or DCSEU, makes home electrification easier and more affordable than ever. Affordable as in district residents can get up to $15,000 off upgrades. Income qualified folks, no cost. Get rebates for heat pumps that warm and cool efficiently. Induction stoves that boil water faster than Donna Summer can say, well, hot stuff. But funding will not last, so visit dcseu.com/electric and bust a move on energy-efficient electrification for your home.
Sometimes the most meaningful gifts or decorations aren't just regular old family pictures. I'm talking about your treasured high school football jersey, a ticket from your first concert, or a flyer for a loved one's art show. These are your most sentimental possessions, and they can be protected and immortalized by the perfect frame. You know, I just got an old passport of my dad's framed. He died a couple years ago, and I don't know why. This really spoke to me. Luckily, FrameBridge makes it easy and affordable to custom frame just about anything. Just pick the perfect frame for your piece from their curated selection of styles, and their design experts will do the rest. And they'll ship it right to your doorstep for free on orders over $100. Best of all is FrameBridge's happiness guarantee. If you're not 100% happy with your piece for any reason, they'll make it right. Visit framebridge.com or one of 8 local FrameBridge stores at 14th Street, Union Market, Georgetown, Bethesda, Old Town, Clarendon, McLean, or the Mosaic District, and start framing.
Today on CityCast DC, I have felt it, I know you have felt it, and that is the pain of a delayed flight that just keeps on getting delayed, or even worse, canceled. And that seems to be happening a lot more than usual these days at DCA. And this is something that CityCast contributor Tim Ebner has been writing about, how DC's most convenient airport has become kind of a nightmare to fly out of this summer. I'm sitting down with Tim and CityCast executive producer Annie Rees to get into exactly what is the deal with DCA right now. Today's Monday, July 21st. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Tim, Annie, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Okay, so as a DC resident, most of us know that there's really no world where somebody who lives in the district would voluntarily choose to fly out of an airport like BWI or Dulles. But Tim, you recently posted that right now you're trying to avoid flying out of DCA at all costs, not because of safety, but because it really is struggling to keep up with the passenger volume. And if there's any threat of storm in the forecast, which DC has been very stormy lately, it's a cluster F. Do I have that right?
You do. And that's kind of a hot take that got some reactions from friends. I travel a lot for my job, door to door where I live on Capitol Hill to Reagan National. I can be at the airport, by Uber in less than 15 minutes. It can take, a 20-minute metro ride. So very convenient, very accessible. I love Washington Reagan as an airport. However, this summer has been a little bit of a cluster, to say the least, when it comes to having an on-time departure. I think mainly the issue here is that there's been a lot of stormy weather in Washington, D.C., combined with safety mindsets that have been put on DCA as of lately, resulting from the devastating crash that happened earlier this year. But if you look at the stormy weather combined with the passenger volume that DCA takes, you really do have something that's a disaster in the making. It's really a house of cards sometimes. So like this past Tuesday, we had some really bad thunderstorms. I think one of the biggest lightning strike storms we've had all summer. And I went to FlightAware, which is a really easy, accessible website where you can get a lot of live flight time data. And if you looked at the 3 airports, Reagan National had 151 canceled flights that day. Compare that to Dulles, which had 64, and BWI Airport, which had 68. And you can immediately see kind of the difference in how some of your delays and cancellations stack up at that airport. And, you might say, well, DCA might have more flights inbound or might have more flights per day. Really, all 3 airports have pretty consistent flight rates daily. So you would expect, that number to be lower closer to BWIs or closer to Dulles. So I've been telling friends and family, if you have a choice and you can get to your place nonstop, your destination nonstop, if it's out of BWI or if it's out of Dulles, go ahead and take that this summer. You might be saving yourself the agony of, hours of delays or a possible cancellation with your flight.
And Annie, I know that you said the same thing. You just came back from a great trip to Ireland that involved a pretty significant flight delay. What have you been hearing and experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing so much traveling recently, and I always travel out of DCA when I can. And it's just kind of gotten to a point where it's like, it felt like no longer anecdotal. Like it was like all of my experiences involved these cascading delays. And like Tim was saying, like a lot of them had also to do with weather, which like I fully grant no airplane can take off when there's lightning strikes. But I was on a flight that was supposed to leave at 7 p.m., left at 11:45 p.m. The next night, my husband was on the same flight. It was supposed to leave at 7 p.m., left at 1:45 a.m. And then when we were coming back to DC, we were a couple of hours delayed. And one thing I thought was really amusing was the pilot got on air and was basically like, do not hang this around my neck. He explicitly said, this is because of DC restricted airspace. We were ready to go out of Chicago. This is not our fault. And that felt like a real difference in departure. And I know that one of our colleagues, Priyanka Tilve, has been dealing with flights. I'm not sure how much you've been traveling, Bridget, but like there's been so many delays that I've been hearing from basically everyone I know.
I'm only laughing because I've been there before too. And most recently, my departure out of DCA was delayed by several hours going abroad, and had to actually change my plans altogether and get out on a taxi to Dulles to make sure I could get another flight to Europe. So I've been there, and I think that a lot of this is stacking up with weather combined with the passenger volume issue at Washington Reagan.
The last time I flew was going from DCA to Boston, and my flight was scheduled for 7 p.m. And I don't think we didn't leave until that morning. It was just delay after delay after delay.
Gosh.
So yeah, I have also had the same experience. Tim, you mentioned that part of this is because of the terrible tragedy that happened in January. How much of this is solely because of the aftermath of what happened there? Or is it like a combination of a bunch of different things?
I think it's a combination of a bunch of different things. We've definitely seen more safety procedures put in place from air traffic control's perspective as it relates to air traffic combined with other flight happenings. So, there's other helicopter incidents that have happened since this crash where airlines came close to a helicopter flying by. There was also, Trump's military parade, which put a ground stop at DCA for several hours, and that disrupted travel. So there's definitely just the fact that we live in the nation's capital, and there are other priorities for airspace when it comes to that airport's location. But secondarily, I think one of the big issues with DCA is it doesn't operate like many other airports in the country because it is located in the city, because it is a high volume, high passenger traffic airport. DCA has what's known as slots, and slots are basically position times that planes can take off within an hour. There are approximately 67 slots per hour that are granted to airplanes to take off. And so you can imagine if you're, in Washington Reagan and you're there in the afternoon and you see a thunderstorm rolling in, you have to get flights out, and you have to do that like by the minute and really precise timing because you have flights landing and flights taking off. So it's a very coordinated, almost ballet structure. When you have a ground stop for a thunderstorm, when you have a ground stop for any type of adverse weather, that's going to put a pause on all of that. And all of those planes are going to be stuck on the taxi or runway or at the gate. So really, you're kind of having this cascading effect overall. What I like to tell passengers this summer is if you are flying out of Washington Reagan, you should absolutely take the earliest flight possible. Much better chance of you getting out and getting to your destination on time. Over the time of day, delays tend to stack up. Other airports are notoriously bad as well. It's no coincidence that Washington Reagan serves like Newark Airport, Boston Logan, LaGuardia. These are also airports that have sort of these slot timed hours and are super congested always. So, I think part of this problem is that a lot of the service connections that Washington Reagan has are these high traffic airport areas, but also that, they have these limited runway space to get flights into the air.
Well, and also the people who are flying out of DCA, right? It's a lot of members of Congress, and Congress is the body that has kept approving expansion of adding more and more flights to make it easier for them to go home. But it seems like that's part of what has contributed to this kind of overabundance of planes and not enough slots, right?
Totally correct. Yeah, the congressional law that was recently authorized or passed is to expand slot service at Washington Reagan. So what we are going to see are more flights inbound and outbound to further away destinations. So I'm sort of an advocate for that because Washington Reagan actually has always had pretty limited national travel destination points. So we will be getting access to more West Coast destinations further away. But the flip side of that is we're going to have more passengers, we're going to have more volume, and we're going to potentially have more delays waiting on the runway. I compare it to airports like Newark, LaGuardia, where if you've gone through those airports before, you kind of build in that time. You know that you're going to get stuck for an hour waiting for your plane to take off. It can really add up to what I call congestion or traffic. Just like we sit in Beltway traffic, this is traffic that's on the runway.
Join the Library of Congress on July 24th for Ask the Ethicist, a live session with Kwame Anthony Appiah, 2024 recipient of the Kluge Prize and resident New York Times ethics columnist, who helps readers sort through life's sticky situations and moral dilemmas, from crypto and AI to lawn chemicals, pet names, using sick leave to slack off, and yes, politics. The ethicist seems to have heard it all. In this special interactive event, explore real-world moral dilemmas and cast your vote on what you would do. Then, hear how one of today's most influential public philosophers thinks through the same questions. Thoughtful and engaging, the library invites you to reflect on everyday ethical questions in a way that's personal, relevant, and fun. That's Ask the Ethicist on July 24th at the Library of Congress. Get free tickets at loc.gov/live. When someone else's negligence changes your life forever, figuring out what to do next can feel overwhelming. You need lawyers who won't back down. NACE Law Group has been winning serious injury and wrongful death cases in D.C. for decades. They don't just settle, they fight for real justice. And they're not afraid to take cases to court to get it. Because when you're facing medical bills, lost wages, and unimaginable pain, good enough isn't good enough. You might remember them as Paulson and Nace. It's the same trusted lawyers, just a new name. If you need someone in your corner, reach out to NACE Law Group for a free, no-obligation consultation. Visit WashingtonDCLawyers.com or call 202-463-1999. That's 202-463-1999.
This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique that quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Just one of the 12 languages you can learn with it, including Dutch, French, Italian, which is going to be next for me, Turkish, and Russian. I love the interactive dialogues that Babbel has, which allow me to practice what I've learned right away, and also the speech recognition function, which makes sure I'm getting the pronunciation just right, which honestly, usually I'm not. Also, I love that Babbel's lessons always cover actual things that I talk about in the real world, like food, talking to people I've just met, and also food. Staying motivated to learn a new language has never been easier thanks to real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations in only 10 to 15 minutes a day on Babbel's mobile app or website. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So is this going to finally spark a conversation about expanding DCA at all? I know that that has a lot of challenges and sometimes seems like it's basically impossible, but could that happen?
Yeah, it's my understanding, with the crash that happened earlier this year, there was a bit of a pause on, air traffic control policies, procedures, making sure safety is the number one priority. We still have an ongoing NTSB investigation, so we have to really see what the outcome findings are from that investigation. And I think there's going to be some changes potentially. I do think that Congress can act here. I do think that there can be changes made. But at this point, it would be too hard to tell. At this current moment, we have expanded service at DCA. We have new flight routes coming in. And so, that's great if you're a traveler, but maybe it's not so great if you're, just waiting in the terminal for an extra 3 hours, or you're stuck on the runway for, an hour and a half trying to take off.
I'm also curious to know, can you kind of just explain more the idea of the restricted airspace, and like what that actually like looks like for how that can challenge planes taking off and landing at DCA?
Yeah, pilots have said, Washington Reagan is one of the most complicated airports to take off or land from. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but really there's limited runway space. So you have only a couple different approaches. The primary ones are coming from the Potomac River. So if you've ever flown into Washington Reagan, you either go northward and westward up the Potomac with the monumental views, or you go southward towards Alexandria, Virginia. There's also another runway that takes you up and over Capitol Hill to points in the Northeast corridor. So you're kind of constricted by airspace. You're constricted by runway size and scope. It's really a capacity issue. And so the idea that we would be adding more flights to an airport that already is at capacity will only result in traffic, will only result in more delays. Add the fact that a thunderstorm happens almost every day after 4:30 p.m. in Washington, D.C. in the summer. And it's just a house of cards. You take one card out and it all comes crashing down. So I've been stranded, and I've heard that same call from pilots, waiting on runways. I've been in Jacksonville, Florida, and delayed overnight and had to take a new flight. And the pilot says, I'm really just stuck here because Washington Reagan won't let us take off. So I think that's really interesting. It's good for travelers to know. And, BWI is the busiest airport in the Washington, D.C. region. They also have some of the lowest delay cancellation rates, and folks can check that. Flight Aware is a great website where you can track your flights in live time, so you know where they are before they even come to your gate for takeoff. And that can also help you predict if your flight is going to be severely delayed, if it could potentially be canceled. I'm one, even before I get to the airport that day, I am tracking like the earlier legs of my flight to see if there are any bumps in the space between the point to point travel. That can sometimes help you predict whether or not you're going to get off on time.
Tim, you are a very serious flyer. You take your travel very seriously. So I think the reason why when you posted this on social media, it got such a spicy reaction is that getting to BWI is a pain in the rear end. It is not
really
easy.
100%.
So let's like, if we're going to talk about it, let's like really talk about it. Is the trade-off for the annoyance of getting to BWI is it worth it in this time of year when so many flights from DCA are getting canceled?
It's totally, I welcome the criticism and I think valid. Here's kind of my recommendation, and I will be flying out of Washington Reagan in the future. Now, knock on wood, I hope, everything's on time, but I doubt that will happen. I kind of have 3 rules to live by when it comes to travel. Number 1, try to fly nonstop whenever possible. If you add in a layover or a stopover to your destination, it is just adding in another chance, an opportunity for you to be delayed or canceled, especially in the summertime of travel. Number 2 is look at your options with your airlines. There are so many different airlines in this region with hubs. We have, American Airlines hub in Washington Reagan. We have United out in Dulles as a hub, and then we have Southwest up at BWI as a major hub. Those oftentimes will lead you to the cheapest flights and sometimes the most reliable flights, just because those hubs have to operate at the most efficient level in order for everything else in their networks to function. And really, number 3 is that golden rule of like, if you can travel earlier in the day in the summer, you should do it, because usually thunderstorms happen late afternoon, late evening. Delays only stack up over the day. So it really is just putting that chance of a cancellation or delay in a much greater opportunity if you're going to risk going out, say, at like 4 p.m. or after.
Okay, so Tim, another experience I've had recently that I'm sure we all have. My flight was delayed, and then canceled. And it was an experience where there really weren't any other options for me that night. I ended up having to fly out the next day. But do you have tips for how to navigate that, how to get on the earliest possible next flight, and just how to kind of like confront that in a friendly way, but where you don't feel like you're just kind of completely getting owned by your airline or your travel experience?
Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than getting stranded at an airport where it's not close to your home. And I think one of the things that people don't realize in the process of a flight getting canceled, you do have options, and you have to think quickly and you have to kind of act quickly as well. So a good thing that I like to say is instead of being like a complaining, whiny type person to the gate agent, try to be nice to them. Be kind to the flight attendants and the pilots. They're typically the ones stranded right next to you, waiting to get on the flight as well. And then when the
Yeah.
cancellation comes through, be ready to act. And there's one of two ways you can deal with the cancellation. I like to use the call function, so calling in directly to an airline. Sometimes call centers get overwhelmed when there's delays across the country, so that might not be your best bet. There's also online chats through the apps for most flights, so you can use sort of a chat agent to get what you need, and I find that works really well. But you can also, what tends to happen is most people kind of like gate lice is what I like to call it. They all cram around the same counter,
That's disgusting.
trying to get a rebooking on the next flight out, and then inevitably you wait in that long line, and the five people in front of you got on the flight, and you don't get the flight the next day. So I like to say, go somewhere else in the airport, find another gate that is open, a flight that is not in service or loading passengers onto their flight. Talk to that gate agent nicely and ask them if they can rebook you from their computer. A lot of times they will rebook you automatically now using technology or through your airline app, which is convenient, but they'll have all the different flight options for you. They also are required to get you to your destination. Sometimes that means with a different airline partner that they code share with. In my case, most recently, when I got canceled out of DCA, I ended up flying Lufthansa, which is a United partner. So they did get me on a flight out of Dulles to get me to Europe, which was great. So you really can work with them there. The other thing, after your flight is completed, just keep in mind that you still have a lot of rights as a passenger. So if you were in a prolonged delay of 4 hours or more, or your flight was canceled, you have actually a qualified right to receive compensation. And that is by the authority of the Department of Transportation. Typically, what you have to do, though, first is file an official complaint with the airline. So this is when it's actually okay to complain, like after you make it home, after you've had some time to sleep, after you've recuperated from all of the hassles of travel. You should definitely file a complaint online with your airline first. Generally, they will review an application within 1 to 2 weeks and provide you with some form of compensation, whether that's flight credits, refunds on your hotel that you might have had to book for the overnight stay, meals that you had in the airport, taxis that you would have had to take. Those are things that I think people don't really often recognize, but you have to save your receipts and you have to document, that you have proof that you spent money on those things. Also, if that doesn't work, you can officially file a complaint through the Department of Transportation. They will then elevate that to the airline, and the airline will be required to respond to you, I believe, within about a month. So you have kind of two protections and layers there through the federal government as well as through the airline. Generally, airlines want to make it up to you. They realize, they recognize they did something wrong. Sometimes they do it automatically, but sometimes you really do have to complain. So this is where being, a little bit of a whiner can help you in the end. And I've done this and I don't have any shame in doing it. It gets you flight credits for future travel. It will get you reimbursed on a lot of expenses. And then, just keep in mind though, that like weather is one of those things that airlines typically don't reimburse on or give you compensation for. So this is why I like to have travel credit cards that have trip insurance on them. I would highly encourage listeners to look into that. If you can get a smart travel credit card that has trip protection built into it, they do reimburse you in instances of bad weather that is unforeseen. I've done this application, a dozen different times. It's kind of like filling out an expense sheet at work, but essentially you would keep all your receipts and you would file a claim, and that claims adjuster would approve what is essentially the delayed travel experience that you had. Travel is obviously a really precious time. I don't want anyone to waste it, but when your time does get eaten into by a delay or cancellation, you should absolutely seek compensation for that. Time is money when it comes to travel.
I'm curious for each of you, when do you get to the airport? What is your philosophy? Say we're just to change tack for a second. Say the flight is like relatively, we think it's going to be on time. When are you arriving and how much of a chaos agent are you? I will admit to being like a pretty big chaos agent, and that's one of the beauties of DCA when it works well, is that you can get through that airport so fast and be at your gate so quickly. So I definitely am often cutting it a little bit close.
I love this question so much because I am the opposite. I am a plan and arrive, see my gate, make sure my plane's there on time, everything's functioning. But I also have, the priority TSA pre-check. I have clear, so I can make it closer to the takeoff time these days. I am one though who also has, all of the credit cards, all of the travel status, all of the airport lounge access. So I entice my travel partner, my wife, to come with me early and take advantage of the airport lounge when we travel.
Lounge life.
I had a feeling that you were like a very efficient traveler, Tim. So this is definitely aligning with my understanding of who you are as a human. I am a real type B person, so I think people might be surprised to hear that nobody does airport better than me. Like I'm efficient. I have clear. I have pre-check. However, it's not because I'm like an organized organized, prepared person. It's because I genuinely enjoy kicking it at the airport. I want to get a drink before the plane takes off. I want to go buy a magazine. I enjoy the people watching. I find a weird kind of peace in a well executed airport situation where you get eyes on the gate, you go to the gate. So Tim, we're aligned there. You get eyes on it. You're like, there it is. Didn't fall into an alternative dimension or anything. Then you go get a drink. You go get a magazine. You go get a snack. That's what I like. I like a nice, lots of time, no stress.
One other thing about Washington Reagan I will add is that a lot of people try to cut it close to their departures. And if you're traveling around any major holiday, whether that's Memorial Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, most people pick to Uber or rideshare into the airport. And there have been historic traffic jams that have backed all the way up onto the GW Parkway. Folks literally running with their suitcases from the Parkway to the airport, like total chaos factor. I cannot stress enough that like Metro is your easiest access point. This airport could not be more conveniently located in the city, connected to the Metro system. There's also a bike share outside that you can take a bike to if you'd like. So there's so many forms of transportation to the airport that I would say, if you're going to risk it, like getting there last minute to your gate, you should probably consider one of the travel things that doesn't involve DC traffic.
Oh, I took bike share to DCA once in my life, and I was smug about it from the day it happened until today. Nothing makes you feel more smug. I drop it in casual. It happened once. I drop it in casual conversation all the time.
Exactly.
I get so much mileage out of that.
Who once took a bike share to DCA.
I like have it on my resume.
Love that. Love that. And also the parking lot is currently undergoing renovation. So if you're going to park there, pay to park. Good luck with that too. There's a lot less parking these days.
While we're talking about just flying out of the DC region in general, what can you tell us about the expansion at Dulles to add more, a new concourse? Do you get the sense that this is in some ways a bit of a reaction to the congestion happening at DCA?
Yeah, I mean, by design, this slot system that Washington Reagan has is so that DC area travelers go to BWI or go to Dulles for their long haul flights. That is really the goal and the purpose. There's also restrictions around how far a plane that takes off from DCA can go in travel time to another location, which is why most of the flight routes are domestic. There's only a few exceptions to that, which I believe are the Bahamas and Canada. We have like 2 international flights at DCA. So Dulles is really by design our long haul international flight airport. But it's, as I mentioned, a United hub. And United is doing a ton of investment in infrastructure there to grow its presence, including additional gates. I heard they're finally getting rid of the people movers as part of their master plan.
The
which,
people
let me tell
movers. Love to see you go.
I have like fond nostalgia for the people movers because I feel like I'm in Star Wars or something. That's like very like 70s kind of era glam. But yeah, the people movers are annoying as anything. And truly, like, there's nothing worse than getting off like a 14-hour flight from Europe and then having to get on a Dulles people mover to take you to customs. There you wait in another line. Yeah. So definitely Dulles is changing some of, I think, its processes and procedures. Having the new Metro point out there, I think, has really opened up the airport to convenience factors. Whereas I think commonly we all complain about flying out of Dulles given how far away it is. Yes, it takes a lot of distance if you're taxiing or if you're metroing. It is a solid hour to get out there. But I love Dulles because I think that they're making a lot of improvements right now. And the master plan, I think, is really focused on a pro-growth strategy there. I think that all 3 of our airports are amazing airports. They offer different options for different travelers. I am not someone who's loyal to a specific airline because I think they all suck generally, especially in the summertime. So
Yes.
If you see a nonstop flight out of Dulles, whereas you have maybe, say, a flight from DCA with a connection in Atlanta or New York, I would highly recommend you go ahead and just bite the bullet and take the metro an hour out to Dulles so you have that convenience factor and you possibly avoid the headache of a future delay.
Well, Tim, Annie, thank you for being here. I will see you soon, hopefully not on a super delayed flight out of DCA.
See you in the lounge.
Me
maybe.
too. Seriously,
Yeah,
I'll let you in the
see you.
lounge.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your travel buddy. You can rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.